Once again, the fatal shootings south of the border have raised questions about the relationship officers have with the people they are policing, especially white cops in black communities. First, some background. Their names alone came to symbolize the issue. Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, Freddie Gray,
and then I will light you up. Get out! Wow. Now!
Sandra Bland, Walter Scott.
Shot fire. Subject get down.
And so many more. Black people dying at the hands of police, a common tragedy in America that now sparks protests
If I can't breathe, you can't breathe.
and raises questions about how police do and should interact with black citizens. I'm joined now by Julian Harper in New York. He's a former NYPD police lieutenant and one of the co-founders of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. And Camille Charles is director of the Center for African Studies at the University of Pennsylvania. She's in Philadelphia tonight. Thanks for joining us to talk about this. You know, I want to ask you both off the top, having just heard that list of names and having, you know, heard the news yesterday out of Louisiana, what went through your mind when you then heard about Minnesota? Camille, why don't we start with you?
What I felt was just an overwhelming sense of sadness and, you know, just sort of feeling like it's Groundhog Day in some ways. But what I noticed right away was looking at my Facebook feed and all of my former students posting about just feeling hopeless. So, I mean, I think this is hitting really hard.
Julian, when you heard yet another, what went through your mind?
Exactly that, yet another. We're having this conversation now, and we're going to have this conversation again. I think that the response by law enforcement is failing the black community. So I understand that until we have a real response and a real conversation about this, this is going to happen again.
In your view, Julian, what are the fault lines here between the police in America and the black communities they're policing?
Fault lines are there is a criminalization of the black community by law enforcement. And when I say that, they throw a complete blanket over the black community and criminalize and demonize the black community. So until there are some real discussions and responses into how we police in this country, we're still going to be dealing with this issue. And the fault line will continue to grow.
Camille?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to point out that criminalization extends beyond the police. It extends beyond law enforcement, that this is something that's central to our history. We have always criminalized black people and demonized black people. It takes on a special kind of importance with law enforcement because they have the authority to inflict violence, especially when they think their own lives are in jeopardy. But I think what happens is that they feel we need a different kind of policing, but also that they're more likely to feel that their own lives are in danger in situations where otherwise they wouldn't believe that. And I think that's why you start to see the disparity in what happens in comparable situations with armed whites.
I kind of want to ask what's wrong with America? You know, I mean, is it an American thing? Is it a police thing? What's at the core of this, Camille?
I mean, I would argue that it's an American thing. As I said, I think it takes on a special importance when you talk about the relationship between law enforcement and the black community, because I think that relationship has always been rife with violence and brutality dating back to the inception of formalized policing in this country. But it also is indicative of generalized American stereotypes about black people that, again, date back to the beginning of the disembarkment of slaves on this continent. So the two things are intertwined, and I think that's part of what makes having the conversation and doing anything to change things more difficult, because it's facing an aspect of who we are as a country that's unpleasant.
Barack Obama said tonight that change in police forces has been too slow. Julian, do you think anything can be done about that? Can this be trained out?
Well, I think what we really need to talk about is accountability. We can talk about training. Police officers get the same training for white individuals as well as black individuals. So we can't talk about training being the sole issue when the training is across the board. Everyone gets the same training. When we talk about, when I'm speaking for New York City Police, we all get the same training. So they don't say, well, when you're policing a black community, this is how we want you to respond. If you're teaching, working in a white community, this is how we want you to respond. So I don't know if the training is the sole answer, but we have to talk about accountability. When we talk about the failures of policing, when we talk about the failures by police officers, and it goes up the ranks, it's not just solely the police officer on patrol. We have to talk about the decision makers and the policy setters within the police department as well. We have to have accountability.
Camille?
I think that's true. I mean, I think that, again, there's the set of rules and responsibilities that police have that are trained to be enforced, you know, across the board, no matter who you're dealing with. But that's not the way that it works out on the street. And again, that's true in most domains in American life. And so the issues here are about sort of training, but not about the training they get in how to react in certain situations, but training about our own cultural and racial biases and how to be more aware of those things and to take responsibility for the fact that we all have those biases that we need to work harder at overcoming. And I think that until we hold law enforcement accountable when they make mistakes, until we're able to acknowledge that, yes, law enforcement has an extremely difficult, challenging, and dangerous job to do. And somehow they're able to do that in comparable situations with white people in a manner that is far less often ending in injury or death. And what can we do to make sure that everybody receives the same treatment, that everybody can see law enforcement as there to protect and serve? I
wonder about the impact of social media, and one of the changes obviously recently compared to a long time ago is people have smartphones now and they're recording this stuff and they're putting it out there, as we've seen again this week. And so, I mean, we know the cycle, right? The event happens, there's video of it, there's outrage, nothing changes, and repeat. Do you worry that there's a danger of indifference, in a sense? The more this happens, the more people don't see it? Camille?
I don't know that indifference is the word that I would use. I think that if I'm concerned at all about desensitization, it's really not in the black community where I worry about that. I think it's in the broader American community where this becomes commonplace, where there is often a tendency in American media to immediately find fault with black victims. So we're immediately looking for criminal records or mugshots or other things to help us rationalize what has happened.
Julian, I just want to jump in and just quickly ask you, Barack Obama also said today that, we can do better than this. Do you believe that's possible? Do you have optimism change will come ever?
His point, we can do better. The question is, are we willing to do better, and are we going to do better? If we don't start holding law enforcement accountable, if we don't start ensuring that there's going to be some real justice, we can talk about justice all the time, but we have to demand justice and we have to make sure that there is justice. So we're going to have this conversation again. It's going to continuously happen, but until we demand, until we start talking about accountability, until we start ensuring that people who are taking these lives unnecessarily are held accountable, we're going to continuously have this conversation, and then there won't be change.
Julian Harper, New York, Camille Charles in Philadelphia, thank you.